welcome on this new video on my YouTube channel. Today we're gonna be doing a tier ranking video. I'm pretty sure you know already what tier ranking is. I'm crazy about it. I love to watch tier ranking videos on books, on TV shows, on movies, and I love to make my own. And today I've decided to do one on book villains. I've seen two book villains video, one on Daniel Green channel and one on Book Roast channel, and I thought that it was really a good idea. I was thinking about doing one myself too, so I decided to take the step and make my own selection. But I realized that there were a lot of villains out there and that maybe one video would not be enough, so it's actually going to be a two-part video. Today we're going to be doing the first half of the villains, and in a couple of weeks or more I'm going to do the second half. I'm just going to explain to you the categories I decided to use for my villains. The first one is BVE, Best Villain Ever. Then we have Gives Me the Creeps for the villains that, I'm like, oh my god, I hate them. Then Tell Me More for the ones I thought had potential but I didn't see enough, or I would be curious to know more about them. Who Are You are for the ones that really didn't leave an imprint on my brain, that I'm like, I really don't even remember their name, something like that. And then Try Again and Another Book are for the ones that were really bad villains. Now, what do I mean by bad villains? Basically, in a villain, I expect a Machiavellic side, I expect to see death also. They're not just like an image of evil and with nothing behind. I want more than that. I want them to do evil things. And yeah, I want them to have a presence in the book and to raise feelings in me, whether they are of horror, fear, disgust, something, you know. I want to feel something for the villains. We're gonna start with the villain in A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I had to look her name up. Gives you an idea of which category she's gonna be in. It's Amarantha. She's like this sorceress, I think, who cursed Tamlin and other courts of fairies. Oh yeah, reminds me, this video is gonna be very spoilery if you haven't read the book or the book series, so just be careful with that. Anyway, so back to Amarantha. She is not really present from what I remember in the book. Like, we know what she did, but she only really appears at the end of it, if I remember well. So she didn't really leave a big impression on me. And I think I'm gonna put her in Who Are You? Because, yeah, I'm like, I don't really remember you. I know you were bad, but what else? So, here. Then I put Legendary and not Caravel, actually, because in Legendary and in Final we have a new kind of villain emerging. That's where the spoilers I was talking about are. So I'm talking about Jax and the Oracle cards. I forgot their names. But they were good villains. Like, I didn't forget them because they were bad. I just forget names. So yeah, there are like these cards from a tarot game, kind of, that come back to life, and they are really awful creatures. And one of them we learn more about because he's kind of maybe a love interest, and it's Jax. And I thought that was a brilliant idea for villains, and I really loved it, and how they were constructed and everything around them. I thought it was really fascinating, so I would go in Gives Me the Creeps or Best Villain Ever. I feel bad in putting it in Best Villain Ever because it's not one of my favorite series. You know, I enjoyed it, but it's not one of my favorite series, so I'm not sure. I'm still gonna put it there because for the villains, I thought they were really good. And I really liked how it was the cards being brought to life with all of their allegories or metaphors attached to them. Thought it was really, really well done. Then we have Cersei. Don't worry, we're gonna have a lot of Game of Thrones villains in this part or in the next video, because there are a lot of bad people in the Game of Thrones universe. But we're gonna start with Cersei. I thought she was such an interesting character. Like, I hate her with everything I have, but she was a very, very good villain, and you could understand the way she was thinking and why she did what she did. So she would go in best villain ever too. Like, I want to acknowledge that she was a really great villain. She was awful. She did awful things. Seriously. Then we have the Dark One in Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. I tried to take very popular villains and a bit less popular villains, but that I thought were interesting to talk about to, yeah, make the video more interesting. So the Dark One in the Chosen Ones was a peculiar villain. You think you know him, but actually you don't. And there was a lot going on there. I thought it was very interesting. We had a lot of background stories, so I don't necessarily need to know more about the guy, but definitely in the gives me the creeps part, because again, he was a terrible villain, but not enough to be best villain ever, but still pretty bad person. And it was, well, like, he had an important part in the book and in the story. Then we have Thiago in Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I remember Thiago for one specific awful scene that's happening in book 2 or 3 of the series, and I really hated the guy. And I do not want to know more about him, and he was not, like, really, we didn't go too much in depth in his personality, but I don't think he was built for us to want to know more. You know, sometimes you think that maybe a villain has an interesting backstory. With Thiago, we already have everything we needed to know about him, and I guess I would put him in gives me the creeps too, because again, this guy was ready to do awful things to reach his goals, which I guess it's a villain thing to do, right? We have Sauron. Sauron is an amazing villain. He is an omnipresent villain in Lord of the Ring, and he is there in other books by Tolkien, but he is a bit of a one-side villain. Like, we don't know that much about him. I remember reading about him being, I think, a student of Morgoth, which is another villain in the Tolkien universe, but I wish we knew more about him. Like, who was he when he was born, and how did he grow up, and how did he get the magic and everything. So he would go in the tell me more, but don't get me wrong, he's a great villain, but it's more that he's this idea of evil than really this person we can characterize in a specific way. Then we have Aidan in the Illuminated series. Even if Aidan is not just a villain, he's more than that, I think, but he is a great character, and he follows his own moral code, which I think why he could be put as a villain. But it's true that for me he's more than that, but I wanted to put him in this video because I think he's an amazing character, and definitely I would put him in the best villain ever because of what he is. Like, he's so unique and he goes beyond a villain status in the end, and I really love that. Then we have another book that's not very popular. It's Ink in the Blood, and it's a book by a Canadian author that I thought was super interesting. It has a bit of a divine comedy vibe and like Italian culture kind of, but it was also talking about genders in a very, very interesting ways, and I wish that this book got more recognition. it also had a very interesting villain. We learn a lot about the villain, same in the book, because it comes from lore that are specific to this universe, but the villain here is very Machiavellic. She is a real trickster, and I really love that about her. And I guess I would put her in the Tell Me More, because I think even if we know where she comes from, it would be very interesting to know more about her. Then we have the Invisibles in the Keeper of the Lost City series. They are interesting villains in the way that they allow the story to move forward and they bring new elements, but they don't have a lot of texture to them, if I can say. And well, it could go with their invisible name, but I'm gonna put them in Who Are You? Yeah, I feel that even if they are like an excuse to move forward with the story and not enough of a part of it by themselves. Then we have Moriarty from the book series of Sherlock Holmes, and then the movies and the TV shows. He's a huge villain, and I have to put him in best villain ever, because I think that's because of the TV show, but he has a very strong presence and he is iconic, really. Like, you can think about Sherlock Holmes without thinking of Moriarty, you know. After we have the Chandrayaans in the Name of the Wind. The Chandrayaans are these mythical, very old and very bloody creatures that are awful and that kill for the fun of it and in a terrible way. We learn a tiny bit about them, but part of the Chandrayaans lore is that they erase all written trace of them, so they are very, very mysterious. So of course I would like to know more about them, but I think they deserve a better spot than that, and I would put them in Gives Me the Creeps, because that's really what they do. Like, they do not appear a lot in the books, but every time they're mentioned or every time we read a little bit about them, ugh, like, they are scary. Seriously scary. I'm just gonna grab some drink. Then we have Count Olaf from a series of unfortunate events. He's a villain, but I guess kind of a funny villain too. Like, he's made to be a caricature of evil, and I think it works very well, and he's a very interesting villain, and I'm gonna definitely put him in Gives Me the Creeps, because for a children's series he did some pretty awful things. Alright, I'm laughing just looking at this villain. It's supposed to be Kronos from Percy Jackson series. That's the movie version, so maybe that's impacting my judgment. And if I was only judging from the book Kronos, I would have a different opinion. But I'm gonna put him in Try Again in another book. Percy Jackson, I feel, is one of the series where you have a lot of villains along the way that works for the big villain, man or woman behind the scenes. But that makes it so that you don't really care for the person behind the curtain controlling all the small villains, because you know they're there, but it's not the one the heroes are facing or anything. So I feel that they lack some presence in the book, and so they don't really make an impression. I would remember more of the less important villains that the heroes fought against, you know. Then we have The Promised Neverland. Again, big spoiler, because me, when I started reading The Promised Neverland, I knew nothing about what was happening in this book, and when I knew, I was horrified. There are these creatures that basically like have human cattle, human breeding, and they raise infants and children in what's supposed to be orphanage but are actually yeah, places where they grow until they get eaten. And even once you know that, they are just terrible like all the time, and every time you see them in the manga illustration, they really give you the creeps. Like they're awful villains. Like they're really scary and they are really evil, so they're gonna go in the give me the creeps category too. We have some very good villains in this selection already. Then Red Rising, we have the Jackal. There are a lot of villains in this series too, but I chose the Jackal because I feel he's one of the most iconic one. And he is very well built character. We see a lot of him mind playing people and again being very cruel. But I think I would like to know more about him, and even if it's said a bit what made him this way, I really would like to know more about him and to understand more where he comes from, but he was a really good and solid villain. Then we have Goddard from the Side series, and I remember G from Book Roast who said that for her he was a basic villain, like he didn't have anything special, and it's true, but for me, even if he didn't have like a strong backstory or anything, because of what he did, all the manipulation, all of the way he was seeing the world and everything, for me he was a very good villain, and he would go in gives me the creeps. Then we have Coriolanus Snow. You see, I would have done that a few months before, maybe he would have been in Tell Me More, but now we have a prequel about him, so doesn't need that anymore. I think he's gonna go in best villain ever because of this prequel. If we only look at Hunger Games, he was already a very good villain, but he was a bit same thing. You only saw one side of him. He was not like super deep villain. You didn't know where he was coming from and what brought him at the position of a president who was directing the Hunger Games, you know? But with the prequel, we really see what's behind all of that, and I really liked it. I really liked being in his head and seeing how of a psychopath he already was, and so he's gonna go in the best villain ever because I think he's also one of these villains you're gonna remember for a long time. And last but not least, we have Vicious, where they sell Vicious as evil against absolute evil, and I don't really agree with that, because I think that it's more gray areas. V-Schwab is very good with that, but there's this character that I see as really evil, and it's Eli Ever, because of the actions he decides to do and how he decides to use his power and like the mindset he has. I don't want to know more about him because we already have a lot of backstory for him. It would go in best villain ever or in gives me the creeps. I'm not sure, like he's not at the same level as Cersei, for example, you know, but he is way better than Thiago because he not only gives me the creeps, he also has a lot of complexity. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna put him in best villain ever because we see so much of his character and we learn so much about him and how he's built in a way and what makes him tick, and I think that's very fascinating with villains to know how they work. That's also why Snow is up there and Moriarty, and yeah, I think that will be my final ranking for these villains. Like I said, this video is already like 20 something minutes. It's already very long, and that's only half of the villains I gathered, so there's gonna be a second part. But for now, you can let me know what you thought about this ranking, if you agree, if you would have put them in different position, if you have other villains you would like me to rank. I would be happy to see all of that in the comments, and otherwise I'll see you again in my next video.